experience, but an answer to their questions. We want to seize the value and perspective of passing things, and so to pull ourselves up out of the maelstrom of daily circumstance. We want to know that the little things are little, and the big things big, before it is too late. We want to see things now as they will seem forever, in the light of eternity. We want to learn to laugh in the face of the inevitable, to smile even at the looming of death. We want to be whole, to coordinate our energies by criticizing and harmonizing our desires. For coordinated energy is the last word in ethics and politics, and perhaps in logic and metaphysics too. To be a philosopher, said Thoreau, is not merely to have subtle thoughts, nor even to found a school, but so to love wisdom as to live, according to its dictates, a life of simplicity, independence, magnanimity, and trust. We may be sure that if we can but find wisdom, nothing else will be added unto us. Seek ye first the good things of the mind, Bacon admonishes us, and the rest will either be supplied, or its loss will not be felt. Truth will not make us rich, but it will make us free.
I don't remember.
Gentle reader will check us here by informing us that philosophy is as useless as chess, as obscure as ignorance, and as stagnant as contempt. There is nothing so absurd, says Cicero, but that it may be found in the books of the philosophers. Doubtless, some philosophers have all sorts of wisdom except common sense, and many of the philosophical writers can use
We're werewolves, not swallows.
Let us resolve on this world of ours only at the ports of life.
Take off that jacket, you're going to ruin it.
Streams of metaphysics and the
My
many
friend
sounding
said something
seas
to
of
the
theological
werewolf leader,
dispute.
and he's like, oh, whatever,
It is
his
philosophy
father's head is still
stagnant.
hanging upon my
Science
asshole.
seems always to
And I
advance, while
fucking pop out
philosophy
with
seems
this.
always
I'm
to lose
like,
ground.
it's okay, I got a
Yet
better
this is
one.
only because philosophy accepts the hard and hazardous task of dealing with problems not yet open to the metaphysics.
It fucking started.
Problems like good and
That's
evil, beauty and
We're werewolves, not
order and
swallows.
freedom, life and death. As soon as the field of inquiry yields knowledge susceptible of exact formulations, every science begins as philosophy and ends as art. It arises
There it
as
is.
hypothesis
That's
and
what I've been
grows into
needing.
achievement.
I knew it was somewhere. It's in the story of
Philosophy is a
philosophy.
hypothetical
Aha!
interpretation of the unknown, as in metaphysics, or of the inexactly known, as in ethics or political philosophy. It is the front trench in the siege of truth. Science is the captured territory, and behind it are those secure regions in which knowledge and art build our imperfect and marvelous world. Philosophy seems to stand still, perplexed, but only as she leaves the fruits of victory to her daughters, the sciences, and herself passes on, divinely discontent, to the uncertain and unexplored. Shall we be more technical? Science is analytical description. Philosophy is synthetic interpretation. Science wishes to resolve the whole into parts, the organism into organs, the obscure into the known. It does not inquire into the values and ideal possibilities of things, nor into their total and final significance. It is content to show their present actuality and function. It narrows its gaze resolutely to the nature and process of things as they are. The scientist is as martial as nature in Turgenev's poem. He is as interested in the leg of a flea as in the creative throes of a genius. But the philosopher is not content to describe the fact. He wishes to ascertain its relation to experience in general, and thereby to get at its meaning and its worth. He combines things in interpretive synthesis. He tries to put together better than before
like now a time because when I fucking said that to the vampire leader, I was like, oh,
science tells us how to heal and
and
how
they all
to
like
kill.
and
It
turn around like
reduces
that.
the rate in
I
retail
remember
and
now
then
because
kills
I
us
was fucking
wholesale
picture and he
more.
caught the picture and it was
But only
the whole
wisdom,
incident.
coordinated in the life of victory over ecclesiasticism and superstition, makes dead those issues which he found alive. Much of his fame, too, came of his inimitable conversation. But scripta manent verba volat. Written words remain while spoke they. The winged words of Voltaire with the rest. What is left to us is too much the flesh of Voltaire, too little the divine fire of his spirit.
God
And
damn
yet,
it.
darkly as we see him through the glass of time, what a spirit! Intelligence transmuting anger into fun, fire into life. A creature of air and flame, the most excitable that ever lived, composed of more ethereal and more throbbing atoms than those of other men. There is none whose mental machinery is more delicate, nor whose equilibrium is at the same time more shifting and more exact. Was he perhaps the greatest intellectual energy in all history? Certainly he worked harder and accomplished more than any other man of his age. Not to be occupied and not to exist amount to the same thing, he said. All people are good except those who are idle. His secretary said he was a miser only of his time. One must give oneself all the occupation one can to make life supportable in this world. The further I advance in age, the more I find work necessary. It becomes in the long run the greatest of pleasures and takes the place of the illusions of life. If you do not want to commit suicide, it has something to do.
Is the heart?
Suicide must have been forcing him before he was ever at work. It was because he was so thoroughly alive that he filled the whole era with his life. Contemporary with one of the greatest of centuries, 1694 to 1778, he was the sole and essence of it. The name Voltaire, said Victor Hugo, is to characterize the entire 18th century. Italy had a Renaissance and Germany had a Reformation, but France had Voltaire. He was for his country both Renaissance and Reformation, and half the Revolution. He carried on the antiseptic skepticism of Montaigne, and the healthy, earthy humor of Rabelais. He fought superstition and corruption more savagely and effectively than Luther or Erasmus, Calvin or Knox or Melanchthon. He helped to make the powder with which Mirabeau and Marat, Danton and Robespierre blew up the old regime. If we judge of men by what they have done, said Lamartine, then Voltaire is incontestably the greatest writer of modern Europe. Destiny gave him 83 years of existence that he might slowly decompose the decayed age, and to combat time, and when he fell, he was the conqueror. No, never has a writer had in his lifetime such influence. Despite exile, imprisonment, and the suppression of almost every one of his books by the minions of he forged fiercely a path for his truth, until at last kings, popes, and emperors catered to him, thrones trembled before him, and half the world listened to catch his every word. It was an age in which many things called for a destroyer. Laughing lions must come, said Nietzsche. Well, Voltaire came and annihilated with laughter. He and Rousseau were the voices of a vast process of economic and political transition from feudal aristocracy to the rule of the middle class. When a rough class is inconvenienced by existing law or custom, it appeals from custom to reason and from law to nature, just as conflicting desires in the individual sparkle into thought. So the wealthy bourgeoisie supported the rationalism of Voltaire and the naturalism of Rousseau. It was necessary to loosen old habits and customs, to renovate and invigorate feeling and thought, to open the mind to experiment and change before revolution could come. Not that Voltaire and Rousseau were the causes of the revolution, perhaps rather they were co-results with it of the forces that seethed and surged beneath the political and social surface of French life. The accompanying light and brilliance of the volcanic heat and conflagration. Philosophy is to history as reason is to desire. In either case, an unconscious process determines from below the conscious thought above. Yet we must not go back too far in attempting to correct the philosopher's tendency to exaggerate the influence of philosophy. Louis XVI, seeing in his temper in the works of Voltaire and Rousseau, those two men have destroyed France, meaning his dynasty. The Bourbons might have preserved themselves, said Napoleon, if they had controlled writing materials. The advent of cannon killed the feudal system, will kill the modern social organization. Books rule the world, said Voltaire, or at least those nations which have a written language, the others do not count. Nothing enfranchises like education, and he began to enfranchise France. When once a nation begins to think, it is impossible to stop it. But with Voltaire, France began to sing.
Economics is the heartbeat of history.
Voltaire, that is to say, François-Marie Arouet, was born at Paris in 1694, the son of a comfortably successful notary and a somewhat aristocratic mother.
Received the
He owed to his father, perhaps, his shrewdness and irascibility, and to his mother something of his levity and wit. He came into the world, so to speak, by a narrow margin. His mother did not survive his birth, and he was so puny and sickly an infant that the nurse did not give him more than a day to live. She was slightly in error, as he lived almost to 84. But throughout his life, his frail body, tormented with illness, his unconquerable spirit. He had for his edification a model elder brother, Armand, a pious lad who fell in love with the Jansenist heresy and courted martyrdom for his faith. "Well," said Armand to a friend who advised the better part of valor, "if you do not want to be hanged, help other people." The father said he had two fools for his sons, one in verse and the other in prose. The fact that François made verses almost as soon as he could write his name convinced his very practical father that nothing good would come of him. But the famous hetaira, Ninon de L'Enclos, who lived in the provincial town to which the Arouets had returned after the birth of François, saw in the youth signs of greatness, and when she died, she left him 2,000 francs for the purchase of books. His early education came from these and from a dissolute abbé, a Jérôme Coignard in the flesh, who taught him skepticism along with his prayers. His later educators, the Jesuits, gave him the very instrument of skepticism by teaching him dialectic, the art of proving anything, and therefore at last that of believing nothing. François became an adept at argument. While the boys played games in the fields, he, aged 12, stayed behind to discuss theology with the doctors. When the time came for him to earn his living, he scandalized his father by proposing to take up literature as a profession. Literature, said Monsieur Arouet, is the profession of the man who wishes to be useless to society and a burden to his relatives, and to die of hunger. One can see the table trembling at his emphasis. So François went in for literature. Not that he was a quiet and merely studious lad. He burned the midnight oil of others. He took to staying out late, frolicking with the wits and roisterers of the town, and experimenting with the commandments, until his exasperated father sent him off to a relative at Caen with instructions to keep the youth practically in confinement. But his jailer fell in love with his wit and soon gave him free rein. After imprisonment, now as later, came exile. His father sent him to The Hague with the French ambassador, requesting strict surveillance of the madcap boy. But François at once fell in love with the little lady, Pampette, held breathless clandestine interviews with her, and wrote to her passionate letters ending always with the refrain, "I shall certainly love you forever." The affair was discovered, and he was sent home. He remembered Pampette for several weeks. In 1715, proud of his 21 years, he went to Paris just in time to be in at the death of Louis XIV. The succeeding Louis being too young to govern France, much less Paris, the power fell into the hands of a regent. And during this quasi-interregnum, life ran riot in the capital of the world, and young Arouet ran with it. He soon achieved a reputation as a brilliant and restless lad. When the regent, for economy, sold half the horses that filled the royal stables, François remarked how much more sensible it would have been to dismiss half the asses that filled the royal court. At last all the bright and naughty things whispered about Paris were fathered upon him, and it was his ill luck that these included 2 poems accusing the regent of desiring to usurp the throne. The regent raged, and meeting the youth in the park one day, said to him, "Monsieur Arouet, I will wager that I can show you something that you have never seen." "What is that?" "The inside of the Bastille." Arouet the next day, April 16, 1717. While in the Bastille, he adopted, for some unknown reason, the pen name of Voltaire, and became a poet in earnest and at length. Before he had served 11 months, he had written a long and not unworthy epic, the Henriade, telling the story of Henry of Navarre. Then the regent, having discovered perhaps that he had imprisoned an innocent man, released him and gave him a pension, whereupon Voltaire wrote thanking him for so taking care of his board, and begging permission hereafter to take care of his lodging himself. He passed now almost with a bound from the prison to the stage. His tragedy, Oedipe, was produced in 1718 and broke all the records of Paris by consecutive nights. His old father, coming to upbraid him, sat in a box and covered his joy by grumbling at every hit, "Oh, the rascal, the rascal." When the fond Fontenelle met Voltaire after the play and damned it with high praise, "Brilliant for tragedy," Voltaire replied, "I reread your pastorals." The youth was in no mood for caution or for courtesy. Had he not put into the play itself these lines? "Our priests are not what simple folk suppose. Their learning is but our credulity." Act 4, Scene 1. And into the mouth of a rasp, this epoch-making challenge. Let us trust to ourselves, see all with our own eyes. Let these be our oracles, our tripods, and our gods. Act 2, Scene 5. The play netted Voltaire 4,000 francs, which he proceeded to invest with a wisdom unheard of in literary men. Through all his tribulations, he kept the art not merely of making a spacious income, but of putting it to work. He respected the classic adage that one must live before one can philosophize. In 1729, he bought up all the tickets in a poorly planned government lottery and made a large sum, much to the anger of the government. But as he became rich, he became ever more generous, and a growing circle of protégés gathered about him as he stepped into the afternoon of life. It was well that he added an almost Hebraic subtlety of finance to his Gallic cleverness of pen, for his next play, Artemire, failed. Voltaire felt the failure keenly, every trying of later defeats. He was always painfully sensitive to public opinion and envied the animals because they do not know what people say of them. Fate added to his dramatic failure a bad case of smallpox. He cured himself by drinking 120 pints of lemonade and somewhat less of physic. When he came out of the shadow of death, he found that his ennuyade had made him famous. He boasted that he had made poetry the fashion. He was received and feted everywhere. The aristocracy caught him up and turned him into a polished man of the world, an unequaled master of conversation, and the inheritor of the finest cultural tradition in Europe. For 8 years he basked in the sunshine of the salons, and then fortune turned away. Some of the aristocracy could not forget that this young man had no other title to place and honor than that of genius, and could not quite forgive him for the distinction. During a dinner at the Duc de Sully's chateau, after Voltaire had held forth for some minutes with unabashed eloquence and wit, the Chevalier de Rohan asked, not sotto voce, "Who is the young man who talks so loud?" "My lord," answered Voltaire quickly, "he is the one who does not carry a great name, but wins respect for the name he has." To answer the Chevalier at all was impertinence. To answer him unanswerably was wisdom. The honorable lord engaged a band of ruffians to assault Voltaire by night, merely cautioning them, "Don't hit his head. Something good may come out of that yet." The next day at the theater, Voltaire appeared, bandaged and limping, walked up to Rohan's box and challenged him to a duel. Then he went home and spent all day practicing with the foils. But the noble Chevalier had no mind to be precipitated into heaven, or elsewhere, by a mere genius. He appealed to his cousin, who was Minister of Police, to protect him. Voltaire was arrested, and found himself again in his old home, the Bastille, privileged once more to view the world from the inside. He was almost immediately released on condition that he go into exile in England. He went, but after being escorted to Dover, he recrossed the Channel in disguise, burning to avenge himself. Warned that he had been discovered, and was about to be arrested a third time, he took ship again, and reconciled himself to 3 years in England, 1726 to 29. London, Letters on the English. He set to work with courage to master the new language. He was displeased to find that plague had 1 syllable and ague 2. He wished that plague would take 1/2 the language and ague the other half. But soon he could read English well, and within a year he was master of the best English literature of the age. He was introduced to literati by Lord Bolingbroke, and dined with one after another of them, even with the elusive and corrosive Dean Swift. He pretended to know pedigree, and asked none of others. When Congreve spoke of his own plays as trifles, and desired to be considered rather a gentleman of leisure than an author, Voltaire said to him sharply, "If you had had the misfortune to be only a gentleman like any other, I should never have come to see you." What surprised him was the freedom with which Bolingbroke, Pope, Addison, and Swift wrote whatever they pleased. Here was a people that had opinions of its own, a people that had remade its religion, hanged its king, imported another, and built a parliament stronger than any ruler in Europe. There was no Bastille here, and no lettre de cachet by which titled commissioners or royal idlers could send their untitled foes to jail without cause and without trial. Here were 13 religions and not one priest. Here was the boldest sect of all, the Quakers, who astonished all Christendom by behaving like Christians. Voltaire never to the end of his life ceased to wonder at them. In the Dictionnaire Philosophique, he makes one of them say, "Our God, who has bidden us love our enemies and suffer evil without complaint, assuredly has no mind that we should cross the sea to go and cut the throats of our brothers, because murderers in red clothes and hats 2 feet high enlist citizens by making a noise with 2 sticks on an ass's skin." It was an England, too, that throbbed with a virile intellectual activity. Bacon's name was still in the air, and the inductive mode of approach was triumphing in every field. Hobbes, 1588 to 1679, had carried out the skeptical spirit of the Renaissance and the practical spirit of his master into so complete and outspoken a materialism as would have won him in France the honor of martyrdom for a fallacy. Locke, 1632 to 1704, had written a masterpiece of psychological analysis, the Essay on the Human Understanding, 1689, without any supernatural assumptions. Collins, Tyndall, and other deists were reaffirming their faith in God while calling into question every other doctrine of the established church. Newton had just died. Voltaire attended the funeral and often recalled the impression made upon him by the national honors awarded to this modest Englishman. Not long ago, he writes, a distinguished company were discussing the trite and frivolous question, who is the greatest man, Caesar, Alexander, Tamerlane, or Cromwell? Someone answered that without doubt it was Isaac Newton, and rightly, for it is to him who masters our minds by the force of truth, and not to those who enslave them by violence, that we owe our reverence. Voltaire became a patient and thorough student of Newton's works, and was later the chief protagonist of Newton's views in France. One must marvel at the quickness with which Voltaire absorbed almost all that England had to teach him, its literature, its science, and its philosophy. He took all these varied elements, passed them through the fire of French culture and the French spirit, and transmuted them into the gold of Gallic wit and eloquence. He recorded his impressions in Letters on the English, which he circulated in manuscript among his friends. He did not dare to print them, for they praised perfidious Albion too highly to suit the taste of the royal censor. They contrasted English political liberty and intellectual independence with French tyranny and bondage. They condemned the idle aristocracy and the tithe-absorbing clergy of France, with their perpetual recourse to the Bastille as the answer to every question and every doubt. They urged the middle classes to rise to their proper, as these classes had in England. Without quite knowing or intending it, these letters were the first cock's crow of the Revolution. Cirey, the Romances. Nevertheless, the regent, not knowing of this Chanticleer, sent Voltaire permission in 1729 to return to France. For 5 years Voltaire enjoyed again that Parisian life whose wine flowed in his veins and whose spirit flowed from his pen. And then some client of a publisher, getting hold of the Letters on the English, turned them without the author's permission into print, and sold them far and wide, to the horror of all good Frenchmen, including Voltaire. The Parliament of Paris at once ordered the book to be publicly burned as scandalous, contrary to religion, to morals, and to respect for authority. And Voltaire learned that he was again on the way to the Bastille. Like a good philosopher, he took to his heels, merely utilizing the occasion to elope with another man's wife. The Marquise du Châtelet was 28. The last was already 40. She was a remarkable woman. She had studied mathematics with the redoubtable Maupertuis, and then with Clairaut. She had written a learnedly annotated translation of Newton's Principia. She was received higher rating than Voltaire in a contest for a prize offered by the French Academy for an essay on the physics of fire. In short, she was precisely the kind of woman who never elopes. But the Marquis was so dull and Voltaire was so interesting. A creature lovable in every way, she called him, the finest ornament in France. He returned her love with fervent admiration, called her a great man whose only fault was being a woman. Formed from her and from the large number of highly talented women then in France his conviction of the native equality of the sexes, and decided that her chateau at Cirey was an admirable refuge from the inclement political weather of Paris. The Marquis was away with his regiment, which had long been his avenue of escape from mathematics, and he made no objection to the new arrangements. Because of the mariage de convenance, which forced rich old men on young women who had little taste for senility but much hunger for romance, the morals of the day permitted a lady to add a lover to her ménage, if it were done with a decent respect for the hypocrisies of mankind. And when she chose not merely a lover, but a genius, all the world forgave her. In the chateau at Cirey, they did not spend their time billing and cooing. All the day was taken up with study and research. Voltaire had an expensive laboratory equipped for work in natural science, and for years the lovers rivaled each other in discovery and disquisition. They had many guests, but it was understood that these should entertain themselves all day long till supper at 9. After supper, occasionally, there were private theatricals, or Voltaire would read to the guests one of his lively stories. Very soon Cirey became the Paris of the French mind. The aristocracy and the bourgeoisie joined in the pilgrimage to taste Voltaire's wine and wit, and see him act in his own plays. He was happy to be the center of this corrupt and brilliant world. He took nothing too seriously, and for a while made rire et faire rire, to laugh and to make laugh, his motto. Catherine of Russia called him the divinity of gaiety. If nature had not made us a little frivolous, he said, we should be most wretched. It is because one can be frivolous that the majority do not hang themselves. There was nothing of the dyspeptic Carlyle about him. Dulce est desipere in loco. It is sweet to be foolish on occasion. Woe to the philosophers who cannot laugh away their wrinkles. I look upon solemnity as a disease. Now that he began to write those delightful romances, Zadig, Candide, Micromegas, Genu, Comme il va, etc., which gave the Voltairean spirit in purer form than anything else in his 99 volumes. They are not novels, but humoresque, picaresque novelettes. The heroes are not persons, but ideas. The villains are superstitions, and the events are thoughts. Some are mere fragments, like L'Ingenue, which is Rousseau before Jean-Jacques. A Huron Indian comes to France with some returning explorers. The first problem to which he gives rise is that of making him a Christian. An abbé gives him a copy of the New Testament, which the Huron likes so much that he soon offers himself not only for baptism, but for circumcision as well. For, he says, I do not find in the book that was put into my hands a single person who was not circumcised. It is therefore evident that I must make a sacrifice custom, and the sooner the better. Hardly has this difficulty been smoothed over when he has trouble over confession. He asks where in the Gospel this is commanded, and is directed to a passage in the Epistle of St. James. Confess your sins to one another. He confesses, but when done, he dragged the abbé from the confessional chair, placed himself in the seat, and bade the abbé confess in turn. Come, my friend, we must confess one another. I have related my sins to you, and you shall not stir till you recount yours. He falls in love with Miss Saint-Yves, but is told that he cannot marry her because she has acted as godmother at his baptism. He is very angry at this little trick of the fates and threatens to get unbaptized. Having received permission to marry her, he is surprised to find that for marriage, notaries, priests, witnesses, contracts, and dispensations are absolutely necessary. You are then very great rogues, since so many precautions are required. And so, as the story passes on from incident to incident, the contradictions between primitive and ecclesiastical Christianity are forced upon the stage. One misses the impartiality of the scholar and the leniency of the philosopher, but Voltaire had begun his war against superstition, and in war we demand impartiality and leniency only of our foes. Micromegas is an imitation of Swift, but perhaps richer than its model in cosmic imagination. The earth is visited by an inhabitant from Sirius. He is some 500,000 feet tall, as befits the citizen of so large a star. On his way through space, he has picked up a gentleman from Saturn, who grieves because he is only a few thousand feet in height. As they walk through the Mediterranean, the Syrian wets his heels. He asks his comrade how many senses the Saturnians have, and is told, "We have 72, but we are daily complaining of the smaller number." "To what age do you commonly live?" "Alas, a mere trifle. Very few on our globe survive 15,000 years. So you see that in a man we begin to die the very moment we are born. Our existence is no more than a point, our duration an instant, and our globe an atom. Scarce do we begin to learn a little when death seems before we can profit by experience."
Fuck yeah, dude.
They stand in the sea of a ship that some animalcule,
Space
and the Syrian poises it on his nail, causing much commotion among the human passengers.
Space Jam.
The chaplains did repeated exorcisms, the sailors swore, and the philosophers
No, that
formed
was
a
like last time watching that Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, like that was like totally a throwback. I don't think Space Jam 2 for a while.
Oh,
Yeah, but it's gonna suck. You can't do it like they did in the 90s.
Just
It's gonna suck because it's gonna have LeBron James.
Without doubt, your joys on this earth must be pure and exquisite.
Well, I'm not
For being
LeBron James.
unencumbered with matter, and to all appearance little else than soul,
Kobe
you must
Bryant.
spend your lives in the delights of
You can
play
tell how
and
much I'm into
reflection,
basketball.
which are the true enjoyments of a perfect spirit. True happiness I have nowhere found, but certainly here it dwells. We have matter enough, answered one of the
Funny
philosophers,
enough,
to do
I
abundance of
rented a pack of
mischief.
cigarettes
You
from
must
the
know,
room.
for example, that at this very
I knew he
moment
had
while I am
smokes,
speaking,
and
there are 100,000
I
animals of our own
haven't gone to the
species
store
covered
yet
with
today and I'm out of
hats,
cigarettes,
slain
so
an
I
equal
just
number
figured
of their
I'd give
fellow
$5 and
creatures
be like,
who wear
I'm taking the rest of
turbans.
this pack of
At
cigarettes.
least they are
Here's
either
$5
slain
and
or
I'll
being
give you
slain.
the rest back.
And this has usually been the case all over the earth from time immemorial. "Miscreants!" cried the indignant Syrian. "I have a good
Miscreants.
mind to take 2 or 3 steps and trample the whole nest of such ridiculous assassins under my feet." "Don't give yourself the trouble," replied the philosopher. "They are industrious enough in securing their own destruction. At the end of 10 years, the 100th part of these wretches will not survive. Besides, the punishment should not be inflicted upon them, but upon those sedentary and slothful barbarians who, from their palaces, give orders for murdering 1,000,000 of men, and then solemnly thank God for their success." Next to Candide, which belongs to a later period of Voltaire's life, the best of these tales is Zadig. Zadig was a Babylonian philosopher. As wise as it is possible for men to be, he knew as much of metaphysics as had ever been known in any age. That is, little or nothing at all. Jealousy made him think he was in love with Semira. In defending her against robbers, he was wounded in the left eye. A messenger was dispatched to Memphis for the great Egyptian physician Hermes, who came with a numerous retinue. He visited Zadig and declared that the patient would lose his eye. He even foretold the day and hour when this fatal event would happen. "Had it been the right eye," said he, "I could easily have cured it, but the wounds of the left eye are incurable." All Babylon lamented the fate of Zadig and admired the profound knowledge of Hermes. In 2 days the abscess broke of its own accord, and Zadig was perfectly cured. Hermes wrote a book to prove that it ought not to have healed. Zadig did not read it. He hurried instead to Semira, only to find that upon hearing Hermes's first report, she had betrothed herself to another man, having, she said, an unconquerable aversion to one-eyed men. Zadig thereupon married a peasant woman, hoping to find in her the virtues which had been missing in the court lady Semira. To make sure of his wife, he arranged with a friend that he, Zadig, should pretend to die, and that the friend should make love to the wife an hour later. So Zadig had himself pronounced dead, and lay in the coffin while his friend first commiserated and then congratulated the widow, and at last proposed immediate marriage to her. She made a brief resistance, and then, protesting she would ne'er consent, consented. Zadig rose from the dead and fled into the woods to console himself with the beauty of nature. Having become a very wise man, he was made vizier to the king, to whose realm he brought prosperity, justice, and peace. But the queen fell in love with him, and the king, perceiving it, began to be troubled. He particularly remarked that the Queen's
So you
shoes
guys
were
wanna
blue
hear
and that
that?
Zadig's
There we
shoes
go.
were blue. That his wife's ribbons were blue and that Zadig's bonnet
It became a long summer month in the younger development.
both.
But as he became more, he became ever more definite, and the growing circle of conversations and the doctrines he passed into the afternoon of life.
Zadig again.
It was not that he had the moment of greatest trouble he would find himself in Canada setting into penalties, for the next day, Almeida and Sarah
devouring one another.
Voltaire felt the same machinery. Every comment
Seemed to annihilate his misfortunes by making him sensible of the nothingness of his own being and that of Babylon. His soul launched into infinity, and detached from the senses, contemplated the immutable order. But when, afterwards, returning to himself, he considered that the Queen had perhaps died for him, the universe vanished from sight. Passing out of Babylon, he saw a man cruelly beating a woman. He responded to her cries for help, fought the man, and at last, to save himself, struck a blow which killed his enemy. Thereupon he turned to the lady and asked, "What further, madam, wouldst thou have me do for thee? Die, villain, for thou hast killed my lover. Oh, that I were able to tear out thy heart." Zadig was shortly afterward captured and enslaved, but he taught his master philosophy and became his trusted counselor. Through his advice, the practice of sati, by which a widow had herself buried with her husband, was abolished by a law which required that before such martyrdom the widow should spend an hour alone with a handsome man. Sent on a mission to the king of Serendib, Zadig taught him that an honest minister could best be found by choosing the lightest dancer among the applicants. The vestibule of the dance hall filled with loose valuables easily stolen, and arranged that each candidate should pass through the vestibule alone and unwatched. When they had all entered, they were asked to dance. Never had dancers performed more unwillingly or with less grace. Their heads were down, their backs bent, their hands pressed to their sides. And so the was on. We can imagine those evenings at Cirey. Potsdam and Frederick. Those who would not come to him wrote to him. In 1736 began his correspondence with Frederick, then prince and not yet great. Frederick's first letter was like that of a boy to a king. This lavish flattery gives us an inkling of the reputation which Voltaire, yet not yet written any of his masterpieces, had already won. It proclaims Voltaire as the greatest man of France, and a mortal who does honor to language. I count it one of the greatest honors of my life to be born the contemporary of a man of such distinguished as yours. It is not given to everyone to make the mind laugh. And what pleasures can surpass those of the mind? Frederick was a free thinker who looked upon dogmas as a king looks upon subjects, and Voltaire boasts that on the throne Frederick would make the Enlightenment fashionable, while he himself perhaps might play Plato to Frederick's Dionysius. When Frederick demurred to the flattery with which Voltaire answered his own, Voltaire replied, "A prince who writes against flattery is as singular as a pope who writes against infallibility." Frederick sent him a copy of the Anti-Machiavel, in which the prince spoke very beautifully of the iniquity of war and of the duty of a king to preserve peace. Voltaire wept tears of joy over this royal pacifist.
This system
A few months later, Frederick made
gives
king,
the government
invaded
many
China, and plunged Europe into a generation of bloodshed. In
opportunities,
1745, the poet and his mathematician went to Paris when Voltaire became a candidate for
Advantages.
membership in the French Academy. To achieve this quite superfluous distinction, he called himself a good Catholic, complimented some powerful Jesuits, lied inexhaustively, and in general behaved as most of us do in such cases.
many
He failed,
advantages.
but a year later he succeeded and delivered a writ as one of the classics of the literature of France.
United.
For a while he lingered in Paris, flitting from salon to salon, and produced a play. From Oedipe at 18 to Irene at 83, he wrote a long series of dramas, some of them failures, most of them successes.
Produce
In 1730, Brutus failed,
for
and in
export.
1732, Erifilo failed. His friends urged him to abandon the drama, but in the same year he produced Zaire, which became his greatest success. Mahomet followed in 1741, Merope in 1743, Semiramis in 1748 and Tancred in 1760. Meanwhile, tragedy and comedy had entered his own life. After 15 years, his love for Madame du Châtelet had somewhat thinned. They had even ceased to quarrel. In 1748, the Marquise fell in love with the handsome young Marquis de Saint-Lambert. When Voltaire discovered it, he raged, but when Saint-Lambert asked his forgiveness, he melted into a benediction. He had reached the crest of life now and began to see death in the distance. He could not take it ill that youth should be served. Such are women, he said philosophically, forgetting that such are men too. I displaced Richelieu, Saint-Lambert turns me out. That is the order of things. One nail drives out the other, so goes the world. He wrote a pretty stanza to the third nail. Saint-Lambert, it is all for thee the flower grows. The rose's thorns are all for me, for thee the rose. Then in 1749 came the death of Madame du Châtelet in childbirth. It was characteristic of the age that her husband and Voltaire and Saint-Lambert should meet at their deathbed with not one word of reproach, and indeed made friends by their common loss. Voltaire tried to forget his bereavement in work. For a time he busied himself with his Siècle de Louis XIV. But what rescued him from despondency was the opportune renewal of Frederick's invitation to come to his court at Potsdam. An invitation accompanied by 3,000 francs for traveling expenses was irresistible. Voltaire left for Berlin in 1750. It soothed him to find himself assigned to a splendid suite in Frederick's palace, and accepted on equal terms by the most powerful monarch of the age. At first his letters were full of satisfaction. Writing on July 24th to D'Argental, he describes Potsdam. 100,000 soldiers, opera, comedy, philosophy, grandeur and graces, grenadiers and muses, trumpets and violins, the suppers of Plato, society and liberty. Who would believe it? Yet it is very true. Years before, he had written, Mon Dieu, what a delightful life it would be to lodge with 3 or 4 men of letters with talents and no jealousy. What imagination. To live quietly, cultivate one's art, enlighten ourselves mutually. I picture to myself that I shall someday live in this little paradise. And it was. Voltaire avoided the state dinners. He could not bear to lead generals. He reserved himself for the private suppers which Frederick, later in the evening, would invite a whole inner circle of literary friends. For this greatest prince of his age yearned to be a poet and a philosopher. The conversation at these suppers was always in French. Voltaire tried to learn German, but gave it up after nearly choking, and wished the Germans had more wit and fewer consonants. One who heard the conversation said that it was better than the most interesting and best-written books in the world. They talked about everything and said what they thought. Frederick's wit was almost as sharp as Voltaire's, and only Voltaire dared to answer him with that finesse which could kill without giving offense. One thinks boldly, one is free here, wrote Voltaire joyfully. Frederick scratches with one hand, but caresses with the other. I am crossed in nothing. I find a port after 50 years of storm. I find the protection of a king, the conversation of a philosopher, the charms of an agreeable man. You one who for 16 years consoled me in misfortune and sheltered me from my enemies. If one can be certain of anything, it is of the character of the King of Prussia. However, in November of the same year, Voltaire thought he would improve his finances by investing in Saxon bonds, despite Frederick's prohibition of such investments. The bonds rose, but his agent Hirsch tried to blackmail him by threatening to publish the transaction.